Okay, thanks. Today we have Min-Kyu Jung on the podcast. He's CEO and co-founder of Ivo, which is a AI contract review solution. It increases efficiency, accuracy, and consistent negotiating positions for contract negotiations. So does its LinkedIn page say. And Min-Kyu, it's great to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So why don't we start out with just talking a little bit about Ivo, the company and what brought you to found it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Ivo is an AI legal assistant that helps legal teams review contracts more efficiently. The way we work is we look at your historical agreements and your playbooks and your requirements. We review agreements for consistency against those requirements, and then we generate red line recommendations. We work with companies like Canva and Quora and WordPress.com and several Fortune 500 companies, specifically with the goal of improving efficiency across these contracting processes.
Yeah, and just a full disclosure, Ivory Law Group is a customer of Ivo's. We've used the tool. We think it's great. It's really helped us become more efficient and really leverage some lower cost personnel, perhaps lower skilled personnel, to get a draft early on that's really in good shape, so that our more higher trained resources can finish the contract negotiation. So we've really seen it as a helpful tool to really kick off the review process. You've got an interesting background. Can you walk us through your career journey from studying law to becoming a tech innovator, and what inspired you to make the switch?
Yes, so I used to be a corporate lawyer. I worked in M&A and capital markets, and I'm not. It seems like a long time ago now. It wasn't that long ago. I think I went into the legal profession feeling very excited about being a lawyer. It was something I wanted to do for a very long time, and I think many parts of my job I truly really loved. I worked with amazing people, and there were some really interesting intellectual challenges that you have to deal with. But I think a lot of the work I did, I remember just always having this nagging feeling that, I feel like technology could be used to make this process better, or I feel like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here that could be improved upon. And I think maybe with the benefit of hindsight, there were good reasons for a lot of things being the way they were. And as a junior lawyer, I didn't fully appreciate that. But I had this incredibly strong compulsion to do something about this. I was that sort of annoying guy talking to all of my colleagues about how I had all of these great ideas for how we could make things better, and no one else was really interested. So I ended up leaving my career. I taught myself how to code, and I built the first version of our product, and it's been something of a whirlwind ever since then.
So what year was that when you made the switch?
I think it was early 2021 or maybe late 2020.
And by that time, you had been practicing law for how long?
Just under 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. And so how did your legal background shape your approach to building what has become Ivo?
Yeah, I think lawyers are really interesting as a group of people, and they're actually very unique in a lot of important ways. And I think because of that, it's really hard to build a solution for legal teams. And not only is it hard to build for legal teams, it's also very hard to sell to legal teams. Lawyers are, I guess I describe as having amazing BS detectors. They have very low tolerance for things that don't just work, and often not a lot of patience to learn a new tool. So I think that really matters, even down to the very small precise details of the way we make some design decisions when we design the product, but all the way to the very high level of big structural decisions we decide to make early on, and how we decide to market and sell the product.
Is there a particular moment or experience in law that made you realize AI could improve or transform the practice?
It's hard to point to a specific one specific thing. It was this, I guess, common pattern of certain tasks that I've had to do, and I think every lawyer has their war stories of when they were early on in their career, where they had to spend a weekend reviewing agreements for consistent use of definitions, or making sure that the marketing version of the prospectus lined up against the word copy, down to the punctuation that's being used. And I think if you do enough of these tasks, you very quickly get a sense of, okay, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here, a lot of tasks that perhaps shouldn't be done by humans, and could be done with technology.
What have you seen that's maybe changing in the AI industry that's put it in a place where we've seen this acceleration of development of AI and implementation of AI in the legal space? What have you seen more as a trend on the business side of things that's brought us to where we are, where we're seeing more of an opportunity to use AI in legal practice?
Well, the main thing is that large language models have just gotten better and better, and it's not in any like unpredictable way. Like, they've gotten better at legal reasoning, which is the main one. Like, context windows have expanded, and there was this very important qualitative jump that happened somewhere between GPT-3 and GPT-4. So of course, GPT-2 was like really impressive in the sense that it could generate coherent sentences. If it was a 1-year-old child, you'd be very impressed. If GPT-2 was rather a 1-year-old child, you'd be very impressed at its ability to form full sentences. And then GPT-3 was really impressive because now you had something that was roughly the equivalent of, I don't know, a smart 12-year-old or 11-year-old. It could generate useful, there was some limited useful business applications there. And then ChatGPT was released, and then there was a jump between ChatGPT and then GPT-4, where GPT-4 was really the first moment when these tools were, maybe they're roughly the equivalent of a smart first-year associate. Of course, there was that famous study on how GPT-4 scored in the 90th percentile of a simulated bar exam, 88th percentile of the LSAT. And I think that was the qualitative jump where these tools went from, or the technology went from being an interesting novelty, at least as far as the applicability in the legal field, to being actually useful in the day-to-day work of a lawyer. So that is a big change. And I think GPT-4 was really the starting gun for this industry, where everyone realized, okay, now this is viable and we all need to race and figure out how we can incorporate these into our products.
So if we use that same line of thought, the next jump in the technology, if there were GPT-5, what do you think that, is that now a partner? How capable is that next step, and when do you think it comes to being?
I mean, your guess there is as good as mine. I mean, of course, a lot of people think that we're already starting to plateau in terms of capabilities. But if we expect the shift from GPT-4 to GPT-5 to be similar to the jump between GPT-3 and GPT-4, we should, of course, expect pretty significant improvements. Again, in fairly obvious ways, right? Like legal reasoning capabilities, again, will improve. There are areas right now where LLMs really struggle when you have complex nested logic. And that also has implications for the correct type of UX for products like ours as well. But the most obvious one is it'll just have more IQ points. It'll go from a first-year associate to maybe not a partner, but somewhere in between.
Sure. And can you provide an example of where LLMs fall short today? You mentioned that that they're not great at doing some things as the current technology exists.
Yeah, well, I think I always use the analogy of a smart first-year associate, which I think is directionally correct, right? So what are the areas where a smart first-year associate might fail? Or if you have complex nested logic, one common example is if you have an exclusion to a limitation of liability, where you almost have a carve out of a carve out. That's an area where LLMs continue to struggle. And there are also like broader considerations here as well. LLMs aren't very good at taking a task, going away, working on the task, doing research, gathering information, and then coming back to you with this fully fleshed out work product. At the moment, they're very, very much like you ask them to do something and they'll give you the first answer that comes to their head. So there are areas like that where certainly there are improvements that can be made.
Yeah. So the transition that you made to coding, talk a little bit about how you taught yourself to code, what resources did you find most helpful, that type of thing.
Well, the way I learned to code is probably not the way I'd recommend a person to learn to code now. Like the most obvious difference is now you have all sorts of great LLMs that can help you. In my case, like I've always been very motivated by building products. I get a real thrill out of building stuff. So the most motivating and fun way for me to learn was starting with a very simple project. And the classical example of this is building a to-do list. And then you work your way backwards. Like what is necessary to learn? Like what do I need to know how to do to build a to-do list? And I do a bunch of Googling, you know, how do I do this? Like what is a variable? What is a for loop? And then you figure out, okay, now I've got this to-do list. And then you graduate to increasingly more complex and sophisticated projects from there. But I think if you start with the projects and you work backwards to what are the fundamental units of information I need to build that thing, at least for me, that was a lot more interesting.
What were some of the challenges you faced when transitioning from law to tech, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the fun thing about being a founder, which I guess is slightly different from just being in tech, is you have to learn how to do a million different things. And for me, again, learning is, I think, a lot of fun. Building things is a lot of fun. And for me, I always love that the initial part of learning a new skill where the learning curve is the steepest, and you have the most to learn, and you're starting from a point of zero. So I don't have a good answer for you other than I think you have to be willing to learn a lot of things very quickly. I don't know if I have a great answer for you, unfortunately, outside of that.
Yeah. Were there any parallels you saw between legal reasoning and coding that helped you in that learning process?
I think there are a lot of parallels between contracts and computer programs, right? And that was one of the interesting observations I had when I started learning how to code. And the very basic version of this is definitions in a contract are like very similar to variables in a computer program. But you can take that analogy, you can stretch it a lot further. You can, you can express logic within a contract, within a provision, like in a very similar way you'd express that logic in a computer program. You can consider like different programming languages to almost be like different jurisdictions. The difference between like Ruby or Python or JavaScript is they're effectively different rules for how you interpret the code, which is kind of analogous to how Australian law or Californian law or New Zealand law will give you a different set of rules for how you should interpret an agreement. You can stretch this analogy very far. The point is, I think they're actually very similar in a lot of ways. And the reason that's interesting, or that was interesting for me, is that it also implies that the way you work with contracts could be more similar to the way engineers work with computer programs. And that process, the way engineers work with computer programs is way more optimized than the way lawyers work with contracts. Like very basic things like the classical example here is version control. Like this is a solved problem that engineers figured out decades ago. Lawyers are still sending back and forth Microsoft Word files that say version 2.6 or final version 2, final, etc., which is I always find really funny. So yeah, I've always thought that was interesting. And I think even now with this new generation of like Microsoft Word add-ins, I think for a lot of companies, the analogy there was, hey, engineers have GitHub Copilot, which is awesome. It lives directly inside your VS Code environment. Wouldn't the equivalent version of that be a Microsoft Word plugin that exists in your Microsoft environment that generates these redline suggestions? So I think for a lot of companies, that was the analogy, and that continues to be the analogy for how to build products for lawyers.
So let's talk a bit in more detail about the Ivo product in particular. What problem would you say it solves, and how does it work?
Yeah, so there are a couple of problems that we solve. The first problem is that when you review an agreement, they're usually like a list of key things that you're looking for over and over again, right? So if you're reviewing a vendor agreement, you might want to understand, how do I terminate this contract? Is there an auto renewal? What are the indemnification obligations? So what Ivo will do for you is it'll go through the agreement for whatever your specific requirements are, and then we'll generate red line recommendations. But like the devil here is in the details. We've put in so much care to the way we built this. So just little things like when we generate the red line recommendations, we will look at the nomenclature the counterparty is using, for example, whatever definitions they're using, and our red line recommendations will conform with whatever the counterparty's document has. So just small details like that are really important. Where necessary, we will actually take the language from your clause library as well when we generate these red line recommendations. So that's important. And then the second thing we do is, and this is more relevant for the larger organizations we work with, is we also help you enforce a consistent negotiating position across your entire team, right? The larger the legal team gets, the more you rely on the concept of having playbooks to ensure that everybody's on the same page. If one person, I don't know, has to go on leave or goes on vacation, whatever it is, and you need someone else to sub in, that person should better get up and running straight away and understand this is how we as an organization accept and tolerate risk when we negotiate these agreements. So we have that kind of a centralized way we can manage that through our customization.
How did you go about developing the tool? Did you work alone, or did you collaborate with others in tech and or the legal industry?
Yeah, well, thankfully, I brought on a team. I have a great co-founder and CTO, and we were fortunate enough to raise funding and bring on a great team of engineers and lawyers and product people.
So what do you rely on your customers to input into Ivo to make the most out of the tool? And what are some of the best practices when entering information from the customer side that you'd recommend?
Yeah, so we take a pretty hands-on approach where we have a customer success manager for every customer. We have an implementation team, or lawyers or former lawyers, who will kind of handhold our customers throughout that process. But of course, the more information our customers can give us, the better. So what we really want to understand is, what are your positions? What are the things that are non-negotiables? What are the things where maybe you're a little bit more flexible? What are the fallback positions that you want if the main position isn't met? Then we can get down to the degree of granularity of, what comments do you want? If the counterparty says X, how do you want to respond to that in the form of a comment bubble? Or, if the counterparty's has a one-way indemnity obligation, how do you want to respond to that? Do you want to replace it with your provision? Do you want to just make it mutual? Do you want to add some sort of comment to explain to the counterparty why you can't accept this position? So the more information we can get from our clients, the more detailed and more configurable or customizable that playbook setup can be.
What role do you see AI playing in the future of the legal profession, particularly in tasks like contract review and legal research?
And just before I answer that question, just elaborate on that other question a bit more as well, is one thing I'll say to any lawyers who are interested in generative AI but don't know where to start is, don't feel overwhelmed, which slightly contradicts what I said before about providing as much information to us as possible. I find that the clients who are most successful with us are the ones who are willing to just jump in and try stuff. And then over time, they might get deeper and deeper into the customization. But to some degree, it is just a new technology that you have to learn and get familiar with, and the best way to do that, like with learning a new language, is you just use it. You jump in and become very familiar with how it works. And then your other question was sort of where you think how this technology might impact lawyers over the longer term. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's a hard question to answer. That depends a little bit on if you believe that AI will continue to improve at the rate it has. or if you think it'll plateau. If you think that AI will, the scaling laws will hold, and we'll find more and more algorithmic efficiencies, and things continue to get better, and you have this like some sort of sci-fi scenario in the future where AI can do anything, it's really hard to predict what legal work will look like in that scenario. But I think at the moment, I think at the moment the best way to think about AI is just like any other technology, right? So what does technology let you do? It gives you more leverage, it makes you more efficient, it makes you more effective, and lets you do more work with less. So I think, just think of AI as like, like the word processor. When word processors were invented, when Microsoft Word became available, no one was worried that Microsoft Word was going to take over the world or make them redundant. People thought, hey, now that I have Microsoft Word, I should probably master the skill, because if I don't, I'm going to fall behind to my peers. But at the end of the day, it's going to make my work life a lot better than having to do all of this via whatever we had before we had Microsoft Word. So I think that's probably the better way to think about this sort of technology.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI and automation in the legal industry?
Well, I think contracting is the main one, which is why, of course, we're building in this space. There are so many opportunities to improve the contracting process. There still is. It is still very early for companies like ours to figure out what the best user experiences should be for improving the contracting experience. And part of the reason I'm so excited about contracting as a use case is because it doesn't just affect lawyers. Every single person in the world, every single business needs to enter into contracts every single day. Contracts become the bottleneck for all sorts of important business processes. You cannot transact with a counterparty if you don't have an agreement in place. So I think I think the scale of the problem is enormous, and I see that being like the area that certainly we're most excited to tackle.
How do you balance the efficiency that AI brings to the table with concerns about maintaining ethical standards and the human touch in legal work?
Yeah, I mean, like, again, assuming we don't have that scenario where AI continues to improve at the rate it is at the moment, like indefinitely, like the human touch will always be required. Like, we're very far away from a scenario where I can replace all of the work a lawyer is doing. And whenever I see people say that AI can replace lawyers now, it usually makes me question if they've even been a lawyer before, or if they've spent a lot of time doing legal work. Because I feel like if you have, you wouldn't say that. But again, I think the way to think about this is just like any other technology. Like, would anyone say that do we still need the human touch, or are we allowed to use Microsoft Word now? I hope no one was saying that. I wasn't a lawyer 20 years ago, but I don't think anyone was having that conversation then. And I think it should be this way we should think of this today.
So turning to some of the challenges and lessons that you've learned, what were some of the most difficult moments in your journey, either as a lawyer or a coder or an entrepreneur in the tech space?
Well, a lot of hard to just name a couple. I think I think one of the things I realized early on when I was practicing is I didn't enjoy being a lawyer that much, and I think one of the things I realized I just wasn't having that much fun. And the reason I bring this up is I know a lot of my friends were in a very similar position where they thought, hey, being a lawyer isn't quite what I expected it to be. And so for me, making that decision to build stuff, which I find much more rewarding, at least to me personally, was a huge transition. And it's the thing that comes to mind, I guess, immediately when you ask me that question. There have been a lot of ups and downs with Ivo, of course, as well, but the whole time it's been a lot of fun, which I think helps paper over all of the lows.
Now you've at least been following the legal industry for some time. Generally, maybe just beyond AI, how do you see the relationship between law and technology evolving? Are you seeing more receptivity to technology in general among lawyers, as from a traditionally late to adopt industry. Do you think that may be changing?
I think so. I'll tell you an interesting observation that we had early on. So we were experimenting with like using large language models to help with the redlining process. We were kind of tinkering with this in as early as 2022, and the reason we took so long to make the decision to do this is whenever I talked about my ideas to lawyers, there was a very bimodal distribution of responses. On the one hand, maybe the most common response was, this is a terrible idea. I can never see lawyers wanting to do anything like this. I will never want to outsource my judgment to some AI or some computer program. And then maybe like 10% of people we spoke to said the opposite of, this is amazing. If you do this, I want to become an investor. You should 100% do this. The very interesting thing was we didn't really get people in between who are kind of lukewarm. It was a very strong reaction either way. And in retrospect, there was actually a very good sign that we were onto something. Just simply the fact that we were receiving these really, really strong reactions either way. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I do think lawyers are very excited and nervous. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I think there's a bit of both, and they both come from the same place, that they recognize that this technology is incredibly powerful, and it has the potential to change their work pretty significantly. And for some people that's really exciting, and for some people it's also exciting, but also perhaps understandably somewhat anxiety inducing, and I'm really sympathetic towards that response as well. But I think the point is, there have been a lot of false starts in the AI legal industry generally, and I think lawyers I think they do understand that this time is different.
How do you stay motivated and inspired while balancing your passion for law and technology?
Well, I'm lucky because it's very easy to stay motivated and inspired, given that we are probably living in the best time, or one of the best times in recent memory, to be working in technology and building products. It's really hard not to be excited when every 6 months there's some fundamental new breakthrough in technology that allows all sorts of exciting new things to happen. So thankfully, that hasn't been something I have to give much thought to.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's considering a career shift or looking to follow a similar path?
The stereotype is that lawyers are super risk averse, and I think there's probably some truth to that. I think being risk averse is actually a really good thing as a lawyer. You want your lawyer to be kind of risk averse and make sure they're thinking about the worst case scenario all of the time. But one observation I've had from the lawyers I know is I feel like often when it comes to making big life decisions like career shifts, maybe they're a little bit too risk averse. And I need to caveat this, of course, as a former lawyer myself. I need to give a disclaimer. Everyone's personal circumstances are different, and I can't guarantee you won't regret your decision. But my feeling is that usually at least from the people I know who are in this position, the potential upside is worth the downside risk, which is actually not that high. So I would encourage lawyers who are like me, who feel this incredibly strong compulsion and pull and feel huge excitement about working in this. I think kind of, in my opinion, certainly once in a career, I think, opportunity to be in the tech industry right now. You should strongly consider making the jump.
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your experience, your thoughts on where this really exciting space in the legal industry is going. Wish you all the best, and we'll be following, and hopefully you'll come on again sometime.
Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate it.